Winter break is always when I sit down with my garden journal and a pencil and a ruler and my seed collection, and I start planning for the following year's garden. There are some seeds that need to be started in early January, so I have to get a head start figuring out where things are going to go, how much of everything I want to grow, and then I can look at my seed collection and see where the gaps are and what I need to order more of. I'm going to share with you how I tend to plan my garden for the following year, every year. Everybody's method is different, but this is just the way that I've been doing it for years, and it tends to work pretty well for me. I start by drawing out my garden space to scale using either graph paper or a ruler. This is this year's raised bed potager. And then I started some really tiny, the new raised beds that we put in this fall. I don't intend to draw the in-ground garden space to scale. I'll just know relatively how much space I have in the ground because it's a permaculture food forest space for the most part, and so that space is all about just dotting plants in where they fit. It's less about I have a 12-foot row for this. So mostly what I'm measuring out and planning in precise detail is the raised beds. Now, one way that some people do this is to use tracing paper, so you can draw the outline of your space on graph paper to scale and then overlay tracing paper. I did this when we first moved here and I was trying to plan the entire backyard, and now my graph paper's gone missing. But this is the tracing paper, and so for every layer you can just fold it up and your measurements are still there. This is important if you're figuring out things like slope in your yard and shade canopy, so you can have different layers that go on top of the design. It's not necessary if you're just planning what you're going to plant in raised beds. You know, something like this is totally sufficient. And it's easy with graph paper because if you're doing square foot gardening, you've got the squares already mapped out, especially if you're doing it to scale on the graph paper, where like 1 square equals 1 square foot. Then it's so easy to plan square foot gardening and figure out how many of each crop you can fit in each little square. I'm doing it on blank paper this year using a ruler just because I have this nice notebook, this nice gardening journal that I had customized with our branding on it. In past years, I've used a garden journal like this. It's a 5-year one. This one is now full, which is why I went ahead and got a branded notebook to use. And in this one, I also, you can see in other years, I've drawn it out on their little graph paper in the book. But a garden journal is so much more than just sketching out your garden plan. It's also useful. I really liked this one for a month-by-month tracker. So it tells you what you need to be sowing each month. I mean, you have to write it in initially because obviously every climate is different, every grower is different, but you fill out that journal and then it reminds you when you look back on previous years when you need to start sowing things for the most success. Anyway, this year I'm just going to use this blank paper, and I started already by sketching out my growing space. So you can see here we have the raised beds. And once I drew those in, I started sketching in the perennials that I know are staying. And so we've got fruit trees along here, fruit tree, these are espaliered fruit trees, and the chicken coop and their perennials in front of the chicken coop that are planted in the ground. We know those are staying. And then any structures that you know are there. So we have these arched trellises here. And then sometimes what I'll do is put little hoops here, and it just reminds me of what needs to be covered with plastic or insect netting. Once I have the garden sketched and all the perennials that I know are there drawn in onto my sketch, then I look at this past growing season's garden journal and all the notes that I left for myself, and I work on a list of things that I want to grow this year and the quantities of all those things that I want to grow. Sometimes the notes that I leave for myself are about how many of something I want to grow, like I want to triple the amount of carrots that I grow this year. Sometimes the notes are about a sowing date that worked really well or that I want to adjust. And sometimes the notes are about a pest or a disease that I'm trying to get ahead of in the garden, maybe by moving where I planted something. This past year, I think I made the most notes on tomatoes. They go into the ground in early to mid-May, and typically they stay in that location until the first frost. And so there's very little succession planning for the garden space when it comes to tomatoes. That is the plant that's there for pretty much the whole growing season. However, there's one exception to that. I have been growing this determinate variety of tomato, so one that has a determinate size and number of tomatoes that it produces. It won't just keep growing and growing and growing. It's called Golden Nugget cherry tomato, and it's a really nice cherry tomato, prolific. You get buckets of tomatoes off of these, but I have noticed, true to form for a determinate tomato, they only get about 4 weeks of production, and then the plant gets sickly and it stops producing, and I end up just ripping it out. So I want to remember this year to do a succession sowing of tomato, which is a little strange, I think, in tomatoes. You don't typically do that. So I think this coming year, I want to start one of these tomato plants in late March, early April. I'm going to start producing around early to mid-July, and I'll get a good solid 4 weeks of production off of that. But in the meantime, I also want to be starting a second one of these Golden Nugget cherry tomatoes. I'll probably start that in late May. Then I anticipate that that second one, the succession sowed tomato, will start producing around mid-August and produce into September up until our first frost. Another tomato note that I left myself is to move where I plant them to try to avoid a pesky soil-borne disease. I had Alternaria fungi. It's a fungal pathogen in my soil last year for the first time in one raised bed, and it looks like it girdles your seedlings. This happens slowly over a week or two, where the plant just looks like it's getting thinner and thinner and thinner right at the base. And so this fungi causes what's called Alternaria collar rot, and basically the collar of the plant is rotting and then it dies. And so this is a soil-borne fungus that I don't think it's airborne. I don't think it would just float over to another raised bed, but it could. That's a thing to keep in mind about trying to avoid pathogens. 70% of plant pathogens are airborne. Late blight is a great example. People may suggest that you move where you've planted your tomatoes to avoid some of these diseases that were affecting it in previous years, but late blight travels 100 kilometers through the air, and so you're not going to get away from it by putting it in a different raised bed. There are some instances where this type of home garden crop rotation can work, and one of those, I'm hoping, is this fungus that's soil-borne. So there are a couple of things that you can avoid by moving your plants, but in general, trying to escape a lot of plant pathogens by moving the beds, rotating the beds year after year, it's not necessarily that helpful for the home garden. One thing that new food growers commonly look up online is how many of each plant they'll need to grow for their family for the year. This isn't exactly something that you can look up. Every family uses a different amount of a given vegetable, regardless of how many mouths you're feeding. So your cooking style, whether you like to preserve things or only eat them fresh, your climate, your pest pressure, even the evolving pickiness of the children in your family can affect how many of something that you need to be able to last all year. So the best way to figure this out is really to take a guess one year, and then you can take an educated guess the next year, and then an even more educated guess the next year. And each year you'll of course get closer to knowing exactly how much you need to grow, and it'll become somewhat intuitive, but of course there will always be these wild cards that keep gardening an imprecise practice. Like, for example, when children decide that they no longer like something that they loved so much last year, and now all of a sudden you have more of it than you know what to do with. So when you're plotting out how much of something to grow, you'll either plan the number of individual plants that you want to grow, like with tomatoes or peppers, or you're going to plan the linear or square feet that those plants will take up. For things like carrots, the seeds are so small and germination can be dicey, so you'll want to use a reference like square foot gardening to figure out how many carrots on average are going to grow in a typical or grow in a square foot. So I expect to get about 9 to 12 nice sized carrots per square foot. And if I want 100 carrots, I should therefore be planting 10 square feet with carrot seeds on average, right? So I just tallied up all of the brassicas that I want to plant. I know that I want to do 1 Waltham broccoli, 2 Yodfa Chinese broccolis, 1 Romanesco broccoli cauliflower hybrid. I want to do 3 Brussels sprouts. Cabbages, I want to do 2 Red Express, and 2 Golden Acres. Also in this bed with the brassicas, I want to do 1 purple of Sicily cauliflower, which seeds I got from Brie at Urban Gardening Canada, and were absolutely beautiful, a showstopper of a cauliflower. And then my favorite go-to cauliflower is the Robber variety, and I want 2 of those. So that is about 14 brassica plants, and I'm planting them in a space with 24 square feet. I mean, cabbages can grow they can grow 18 inches in diameter with the leaves easily. If I devote this whole bed to brassicas, that's 24 square feet. Let's be on the safe side and say I can fit 12 to 14 plants in that bed. So for things like that, where I know an entire bed is going to be all the same type of thing, then I'll just put like general brassica bed and then the number of plants that I can fit in there. And then when I'm looking at my seedlings, I know how many of these I can put in that bed when it comes time to plant, and then the rest I'll just find a place for. It's now been a couple of days since I last sat down with the camera and my seed journal, and I think I've got it mostly completed now. So to recap, this is how I planned my garden for the 2025 growing season. First, I drew out the outline of my growing space, square footage that I have available, and if you do it to scale, it's even easier to put in how many plants are going to fit in each space. It's a lot easier to visualize where the plants are actually going to go. And I have these planting lists. So I went through all of my notes from the last several years of everything that I grew, and I made a list of everything I want to grow again, or new things I want to add to the garden this year, certain things I wanted to take out of my growing list. I wrote down the quantities that I'm going to need of everything, and then as I found places for each of these things in that drawing of the garden, I made a little check mark next to it. And so I slowly went through and figured out where things were going to go with pencils, so you can erase when you decide you want to move something. And this is always going to be a little bit flexible, but it tells me exactly what I do and don't have room for. Luckily for me, if I don't have room for something, I'm just going to fill some pots or expand into my mom's property a little bit, or get Kim to build more raised beds. All right, so that's what I did with the planning, and I want to show you the next steps in my garden planning for 2025. I like to start it with goals. It's silly, you don't need to do this, but my goals for 2025 are to grow more pumpkins. Another goal is to try to get ahead of the tomato diseases that we have here. I have a lot of hybrid seeds and some heirlooms that are supposedly known for being resistant to some of the bacteria and fungi that have attacked my tomatoes here in the last few years. So get ahead of the tomato diseases with specific varieties and moving them to a new bed. And I want to grow enough of some things to be able to sell and donate. So I plan to grow a lot of eucalyptus this year, and then come next late fall, I plan to sell a bunch of bundles of eucalyptus on Facebook Marketplace. And then potatoes, I'm hoping to do a really cool Ruth Stout no-till potato trial at my mom's place, so in the ground or on the ground, and we're gonna have a ton of potatoes, enough to feed our families, and then also donate the rest of those to the food bank. So that's my garden goals for 2025. I also included a budget here. I haven't filled it out yet, but I know I'm going to need to buy some new triple mix because we have some new raised beds that have been put in just at the end of this growing season, and so they're not filled yet. Oh, and Kim might build a couple more raised beds next year if we can find the money, and so we'd have to put the lumber costs on here. Although you can find awesome lumber on Facebook Marketplace for pretty cheap, so we're gonna try to do that again. Anyway, I like to just start out my year with like big picture plans and overview, and then we get into the actual planting. So for January, I need to write out the things that I need to start. That's coming up. I need to write that down, but there's only a couple things anyway. Same for February. And then for March, I'm gonna probably need a couple pages because that's when we start most things around here. I also really like to make a note on the weather. I was inspired to do this by Charles Dowding. I can't remember the book anymore, but one of his books, he just describes the weather and the nature around him each season, and it was beautiful and inspiring. And so since I read that book, I've really enjoyed making notes on just
weather patterns in each month. And so I can look back now and see that February in 2022, I think it was, there was no snow, the ground was not frozen. I was outside planting bare root grapes and raspberries in February. And I mean, in my entire life of living in Ontario, Canada, we've had tons of snow and a very frozen earth in February. So it's just interesting to have records of that kind of thing. And then I also make notes of like wildlife and if there's ever an intense pest pressure that's, I think it's climate related, I make a note of that too. So I just have something to look back on. Anyway, that is my garden plan for 2025. It's flexible, it's preliminary, but it's enough to get started. If you're planning a big garden this year and you want to make sure that you have room for everything, especially if you're starting seeds or if you're placing an order for seedlings through a local greenhouse, it's a really good idea to make sure that you have enough space for everything that you want to grow. So map it out first, and you'll thank yourself later when you're trying to find spaces to put 1,000 seedlings. It can get really stressful when you have a lot of things and you just don't have the space to put them. Anyway, I hope that you've taken something valuable from this, and I hope that you are starting to think about the 2025 growing season with some sort of anticipation, hopefully not with too much dread. And as always, I hope that you'll come and grow with us.